In the early 1600s, the Dutch Republic stood at the center of a rapidly changing world. It was a small nation with a powerful navy, thriving ports, and a booming merchant class. Wealth flowed into Amsterdam from Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Ships arrived daily, loaded with spices, fabrics, porcelain, and rare goods that Europe had never seen before. It was a time of confidence, scientific advancement, and cultural growth. This period would later be known as the Dutch Golden Age, and in the middle of this prosperity, a simple flower began to capture the imagination of a nation. That flower was the tulip. It had arrived in Europe from the Ottoman Empire a few decades earlier. At first, it was nothing more than a curious new plant. But unlike the flowers Europeans were used to, tulips had bold shapes and rich, vibrant colors. They seemed exotic, sophisticated, and mysterious. The wealthy began planting them in private gardens as a symbol of status. A rare tulip bulb became a sign of taste and success. Owning one meant you were part of the elite world of art, science, and commerce that defined the Dutch Republic at its peak. But the tulip's journey was only beginning. As botanists experimented with growing new varieties, something unexpected happened. Some tulips developed dramatic streaks and flame-like patterns on their petals. These patterns gave certain flowers a unique, almost painted look. Nobody at the time understood the cause. Today, we know it was a virus that infected the bulbs, causing the colors to break in unpredictable ways. But to people in the 1600s, these broken tulips were magical. They were unlike anything else in nature. The most beautiful varieties could only be produced randomly, which made them incredibly rare. And rarity in a wealthy society almost always leads to value. As interest grew, tulips began moving out of private gardens and into bustling markets. At first, it was simple buying and selling, but soon, dealers, merchants, and ordinary citizens began treating tulips as investments. People purchased bulbs not because they wanted the flowers, but because they believed they could sell them later for more money. The lists of tulip varieties and their prices started to look like modern stock tables. This was the beginning of Tulip Mania. By the early 1630s, tulips had transformed from plants into speculative assets. Some bulbs changed hands multiple times before they were even planted. Because tulips only bloomed for a short period each year, most trading happened through futures contracts. These contracts promised that someone would buy or sell a bulb at a set price when the next blooming season arrived. But the buyers and sellers rarely cared about the flowers themselves. They cared about the price. They cared about profit. Tulip trading became a game of expectations, where value was determined not by the rarity of the bulb, but by the belief that someone else would want it even more tomorrow. This belief became so strong that prices rose far beyond anything reasonable. Ordinary tulips became expensive, rare varieties became unbelievably costly, and the rarest tulips of all, bulbs like the Semper Augustus, with its white petals streaked with dark red, became legendary. Whether the most extreme prices were exaggerated later or not, it is clear that some bulbs reached values comparable to large houses, valuable paintings, or years of a skilled worker's wages. Tulips were no longer a hobby for the elite. They were becoming a national obsession. People from all social classes joined the frenzy. Wealthy merchants traded bulbs in private clubs. Artisans and craftsmen pooled money to buy shares of bulbs they could never afford on their own. Farmers, sailors and laborers became convinced that tulips offered a path to rapid wealth. A person could buy a bulb today, sell it next week for a profit, and repeat the process. Stories spread about individuals who had supposedly made fortunes overnight. Whether these stories were true didn't matter. They fueled a growing belief that tulip trading was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But beneath the excitement, cracks were forming. Prices had risen so quickly that very few people could afford the most valuable bulbs. Many traders bought on credit, promising to pay later, assuming they could sell the contract before payment was due. The entire system relied on constant demand. As long as people believed tulips would keep rising in value, the market remained stable. But if that belief ever weakened, even slightly, everything could collapse. That moment arrived in February 1637. In the city of Haarlem, a routine tulip auction was held. But for reasons that remain debated, a harsh winter, economic uncertainty, or simply the limits of how high prices could climb, buyers hesitated. For the first time, they refused to pay the sky-high amounts that had become normal. The auction failed, and in that instant, confidence shattered. Like a spark hitting dry wood, panic spread across the country. The crash was sudden and severe. Prices that had taken years to climb fell in a matter of days. Bulbs that had been worth large sums of money became unsellable. Traders who had purchased bulbs on credit now owed money they couldn't repay. Many of the contracts people had been trading were no longer enforceable. Some tried to sue for payment, but courts were reluctant to support contracts that were built entirely on speculation and unrealistic expectations. The government attempted to step in, but by then the damage was done. Tulip Mania had collapsed, but the aftermath was more complicated than the legend suggests. While some individuals lost fortunes, the broader Dutch economy did not collapse. The Dutch Republic remained a global power. Trade continued. Art and science continued. Life moved on. The idea that the tulip crash destroyed the national economy is a myth created long after the event. In reality, the bubble affected a portion of the population, but not the entire nation. However, the psychological impact was real. Tulip Mania became a warning, a symbol of how quickly confidence can turn into fear. A story about human behavior, where emotion overrides logic and where the idea of easy profit becomes more powerful than reality. Over time, writers and historians use Tulip Mania as a lesson in the dangers of speculation, comparing it to later economic crises, from the South Sea bubble to the stock market crashes of the modern age. Today, the tulip remains a national symbol of the Netherlands. Fields of bright flowers bloom across the country every spring. But behind their beauty lies a story of extraordinary optimism and sudden collapse. A story about a moment when a flower became more valuable than reason. Tulip Mania is remembered not because of the tulips themselves, but because of what it revealed about people, their hopes, their fears, and the belief that something simple can become priceless as long as enough people agree. In the end, the tulip was just a bulb in the ground. It had no power, no intention, and no real value beyond what humans imagined. The real force behind Tulip Mania was human behavior, the same behavior that shapes markets today: the desire to get ahead, the fear of missing out, and the belief that this time the price will keep rising forever. Tulip Mania remains one of history's most famous economic bubbles. A reminder that wealth built on speculation can vanish as quickly as it appears, and a lesson that even the most prosperous societies are never immune to the powerful pull of irrational confidence. A flower started it, people completed it, and history remembers it.